Ethan Cole had never intended to marry an alien princess. In fact, until that day, he had barely believed such a thing could even happen outside of old fairy tales or science fiction novels. Yet there he was in the grand palace of Zifira, staring in disbelief at the High Council, who were murmuring among themselves like a storm about to break. He had arrived on Zifira only a week ago as part of a human delegation. His job was simple: observe, learn, and help establish diplomatic ties. He was a pilot by training, known among his peers for quick reflexes in space combat simulations, but not particularly for diplomacy or etiquette. This mission was supposed to be straightforward, routine even, and yet somehow the most ordinary action had turned into a planetary scandal. It all began during the ceremonial banquet. The palace glittered with colors Ethan had never seen before, shimmering banners and glowing floors reflecting off the walls. Alien nobles moved with a fluid grace, their movements precise and deliberate. The air smelled faintly of sweet spices, and a low hum of music vibrated through the marble hall. Ethan tried to follow the proper protocol, observing the other delegates from distant star systems bowing and nodding as the princess walked among them. Princess Lyra was stunning, not just in appearance, but in presence. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and held a quiet authority that silenced the room when she entered. Her ceremonial sash, a long ribbon of silver-threaded silk, signified her status and had rules around it that Ethan had not known or fully understood. He had been nervous, as he always was around figures of authority, and when he reached out to steady a serving tray that had been wobbling in his hands, his fingers brushed against her sash. It was an accident, completely unintentional, but in that moment the room froze. The music stopped mid-note. Gasps echoed off the high ceilings. The council members straightened in alarm, their antennas twitching in disbelief. You touched the princess," one of the council elders hissed, his voice a mixture of shock and anger. Ethan froze. I didn't mean to," he stammered. "It was an accident. I was just trying to—" The High Council would not be placated by excuses. Their voices rose, repeating the centuries-old law that governed Zifira. Any outsider who touches the ceremonial sash of the princess without her consent must be considered her chosen mate. It was a law no one questioned, a law that had held for hundreds of years, ensuring the stability of the royal family. Ethan's stomach sank. "Chosen mate?" he asked, disbelief lacing his voice. He could barely imagine how his life had gone from quiet diplomacy to cosmic absurdity in under a minute. Princess Lyra stepped forward, her expression unreadable. She raised a hand, signaling silence. Ethan noticed the subtle flick of her wrist, the way her eyes studied him as if she were reading his thoughts. He expected anger, but what he saw instead was curiosity and perhaps a hint of amusement. "You touched the sash," she said, her voice calm but firm. "By our law, that action has consequences. Do you understand?" "Yes." "I think so," Ethan said, his voice small. "But I didn't know. I swear it was an accident." The council's murmuring grew louder, but Lyra held up her hand again. "The law is clear," she said. "However, there is discretion in how it is observed. Since this was unintentional, we will follow the proper rituals, and it will be done in a way that preserves dignity for both parties." Ethan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Dignity. He barely had enough dignity left to stand upright without tripping over his own feet. In the hours that followed, Ethan was escorted to a private chamber to prepare for the ceremonial marriage. He was given elaborate robes that felt stiff and uncomfortable, and he spent most of the time staring at his reflection in disbelief. How could he, a simple human from Earth, be considered the husband of an alien princess? When Lyra finally appeared in the room, she was radiant in her ceremonial dress. Her sash shimmered under the palace lights, and Ethan could not help but feel a sense of awe. She smiled faintly, a small curve of her lips that seemed both knowing and patient. "Do not worry," she said quietly. "This is not how I would have chosen a mate either. But we must follow tradition, and for now we are bound by it." Ethan nodded, unsure what to say. Words seemed inadequate to describe the whirlwind of emotions he felt. Fear, confusion, disbelief, and strangely, admiration. Lyra seemed calm, collected, and yet there was an unmistakable spark of intelligence in her eyes, a spark that made him feel small and yet alive at the same time. The ceremony itself was a blur. The palace hall filled with dignitaries and observers, all watching as Ethan and Lyra stood side by side. He repeated the formal vows in a language he barely understood, and when Lyra placed her hand in his, he felt a strange sense of connection, as if the law that bound them also created a thread between two worlds. After the ceremony, they were led to a private garden within the palace. Alien plants glowed softly under the moonlight, and a gentle breeze carried unfamiliar scents. Lyra finally spoke in a tone that was quieter, more personal. "You must understand," she said, "this is only the beginning. Being the husband of a princess is not just a title. You will be expected to learn our customs, participate in court matters, and help protect Zephyr if the need arises." Ethan swallowed hard. I'm not sure I can do all that," he admitted. "I'm just a pilot. I've never done anything like this before." Lyra's eyes softened. "Then you will learn. Humans have a way of seeing solutions where others see only rules. That might be useful." Ethan felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this accident would not destroy him entirely. Perhaps with time he could find a way to navigate this strange alien world. In the following days, Ethan's life became a whirlwind of instruction and adjustment. He learned the protocols of the palace, the intricacies of the alien language, and even the ceremonial dances required for public appearances. It was overwhelming, but he noticed that Lyra often guided him with patience, correcting his mistakes gently and even sharing small jokes that no one else would understand. Despite the circumstances, Ethan began to see a different side of Zephyra. The palace, for all its rules and grandeur, was filled with a society that valued intelligence, strategy, and honor. Humans had much to learn, but Ethan could see that his perspective, his ingenuity, quick thinking, and ability to improvise might not be entirely unwelcome. Then came the first real test. A neighboring system challenged Zephyra's borders, sending envoys to demand concessions. The High Council debated strategies, all traditional and rigid, but Ethan, observing quietly, noticed a weakness in their approach. "You could try a different negotiation angle," he suggested cautiously during a private council session. "Rather than appealing to fear or pride, appeal to mutual benefit. Show them that working together is better than fighting." The room went silent. Lyra's gaze was fixed on him, curious. The council elders exchanged skeptical looks. Yet slowly they began to see the merit in his words. A plan was formed incorporating Ethan's ideas, blending human pragmatism with Zephyran tradition. The negotiations were tense but successful. Zephyra maintained its borders without bloodshed, and Ethan could not help but feel a surge of pride. He had stumbled into this marriage, yet in some small way, he was beginning to prove his worth, not as a husband by law, but as an ally, a problem solver, and a human who could bring something new to an ancient culture. One evening, as the twin moons of Zephyra rose over the palace, Ethan and Lyra walked through the gardens once more. "You handled yourself well today," Lyra said softly. "The council respected your input, even if they were reluctant at first. I did not expect humans to be so adaptable." Ethan shrugged, trying to hide his embarrassment. "I'm still learning. I have no idea what I'm doing half the time." Lyra laughed, a sound that was gentle yet musical. "That is what makes you interesting. You see possibilities where we see only rules. Perhaps this accident was not entirely unfortunate." Ethan smiled, a small, genuine smile. For the first time since the ceremony, he felt a glimmer of hope that this forced union might lead to something more than chaos and confusion. Perhaps through respect and understanding, he could navigate this new world. And as he looked at Lyra, he realized that this accident, terrifying as it had been, might just be the beginning of an extraordinary partnership, one that could change not only their lives but the fate of Zephyra itself. The future was uncertain, but for the first time Ethan felt ready to face it. He was no longer just a human visitor. He was the husband of an alien princess, and somehow, against all odds, that did not feel entirely impossible. Ethan Cole had survived the first shock of accidentally becoming the husband of Princess Lyra, and over the weeks he had slowly adapted to palace life. The court of Zephyra, with all its strict rules, alien traditions, and curious customs, had begun to feel less like a prison and more like a place where he could contribute. He still stumbled at times, spilling ceremonial drinks or mispronouncing words in the royal language, but Lyra often guided him with patience and subtle amusement. Yet despite the progress, One truth remained. Their union was still bound by law, not choice. Ethan's heart sometimes ached at the thought of how his life had changed in a single careless moment. And Lyra, though outwardly calm and composed, was cautious, curious, and distant in ways Ethan did not fully understand. The turning point came when the High Council informed them that a neighboring system, the Corinne Dominion, had sent envoys to dispute Zephyra's trade routes. Unlike the minor negotiations Ethan had witnessed before, this was serious. The council debated defensive strategies, trade concessions, and political intimidation, but all their solutions relied on old customs and tradition. Ethan, observing quietly, realized that the council's approach might escalate tensions rather than resolve them. He cleared his throat. "Perhaps we can try something different," he suggested cautiously. "Instead of relying only on authority or past agreements, we could show them a partnership is more valuable than conflict. There must be a solution that benefits both sides." Lyra's eyes met his, narrowing in thought. "A human solution?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "Yes, something unexpected. Something that mixes our ways with yours." The council elders exchanged skeptical looks. One of them spoke sharply. "You are a human. You know nothing of diplomacy between star systems. Your ideas are naive." Lyra placed a hand on Ethan's arm, her touch calm but firm. "Let him speak," she said. "Sometimes fresh eyes see paths we cannot." Encouraged, Ethan outlined a plan. Scifi would offer a limited trade agreement, sharing some resources with the Corin Dominion. In exchange for security guarantees and access to their technology, he emphasized fairness and transparency, presenting a logical strategy rather than threats or ultimatums. The council was hesitant, but Lyra's subtle support gave Ethan credibility. After long debates, they agreed to send a delegation under his and Lyra's guidance. The day of the meeting, Ethan felt a mix of fear and determination. He was representing an alien world, negotiating matters that could affect millions of lives, all because of a mistake that had led him here. The Corin envoys were stern, their eyes wary of the human standing beside the princess. Yet as Ethan spoke calmly and clearly, outlining the plan in terms both sides could understand, something remarkable happened. The tension began to ease. The Corin leaders were intrigued by his perspective, a mixture of boldness and pragmatism. They saw a human who respected their interests but was unafraid to offer creative solutions. Lyra watched closely, silently impressed. Ethan was not just surviving this strange world, he was beginning to excel in it. She realized that his accidental marriage had brought someone who could challenge Zephyra's old ways, someone whose human perspective was an asset rather than a liability. When the negotiations concluded successfully, Zephyra gained new trade opportunities and the Corin Dominion agreed to stronger security measures. Ethan felt a sense of pride he had never known before. He had done something meaningful, not as a pilot or a diplomat alone, but as the husband of the princess, someone who had been forced into a role and was now shaping it with courage and intelligence. Back at the palace, the celebrations were muted but genuine. The council elders nodded at Ethan with newfound respect, and Lyra allowed herself a small smile, the first real sign of warmth she had shown since the ceremony. "You handled that well," she said quietly as they walked through the palace gardens later that evening. "I did not expect humans to have such adaptability." Ethan shrugged. "I'm lucky, I guess. And I had a great teacher." Lyra laughed softly. "Perhaps. Or perhaps luck brought us together for a reason. You have a way of seeing possibilities where we see only rules." Their bond began to strengthen after that day. Ethan learned more about Zephyra's culture, her people, and the challenges the planet faced. He trained in ceremonial combat, not for show, but to understand the discipline and strategy that underpinned Zephyra's military traditions. Lyra shared her knowledge openly, guiding him through the nuances of leadership, etiquette, and negotiation. As they spent more time together, their relationship shifted subtly. They shared conversations about their worlds, dreams, and hopes. Ethan marveled at Lyra's intelligence, her strength, and her commitment to her people. Lyra, in turn, saw Ethan's courage, ingenuity, and unwavering integrity. What had begun as an accident slowly evolved into mutual respect, and the faintest spark of something deeper. One morning, a crisis arose. A faction within the palace, unhappy with the human presence, attempted to sabotage an important communication relay, threatening both Zephyra's security and the fragile alliance with the Corin Dominion. Ethan, familiar now with palace operations, noticed irregularities in the schedules and patterns of the guards. He alerted Lyra, and together they uncovered the plot before any damage was done. "This is exactly why your perspective is valuable," Lyra said, her voice filled with admiration. "You saw what we would have overlooked." Ethan smiled, a little embarrassed. "I'm just trying to help." "No," Lyra said firmly. "You are more than that. You are part of this world now." The crisis averted, Ethan and Lyra walked through the palace halls, discussing the implications and how to prevent future threats. They laughed lightly, shared observations, and for the first time, the weight of their forced union seemed lighter, replaced by a sense of partnership. Weeks turned into months, and their relationship grew stronger. Ethan's presence in the court brought subtle changes. Human problem-solving blended with Zephyra's traditions, leading to more efficient governance and better diplomatic outcomes. The people began to accept him, seeing that he was not merely an outsider but someone who could contribute positively to their society. One evening, Lyra invited Ethan to the observation deck overlooking the capital. The twin moons of Zephira cast a silver glow over the city, reflecting off the shimmering buildings and calm waters. "You have changed much in a short time," Lyra said quietly. "Not just in skill, but in how people see you. You were an accident, yes, but perhaps one the universe intended." Ethan looked at her, feeling a mix of awe and gratitude. "I never imagined this life," he admitted, "but I think I'm beginning to understand why it happened. You and Zephira have given me a chance to do something meaningful." Lyra nodded. "And you have given us something in return. Courage, creativity, and hope. Perhaps we are learning from each other more than either of us expected." For a long moment, they stood in silence, watching the moons rise higher, feeling the weight of their shared responsibilities and the possibilities ahead. The accidental marriage had begun as a mistake, a moment of chaos, but now it had grown into something neither of them had anticipated: trust, respect, and the beginnings of a true partnership. As Ethan reflected on the journey, he realized that this accident had changed not only his life, but the future of an entire planet. He was no longer just a human visitor, no longer just a pilot who stumbled into diplomacy. He was a partner, a problem solver, and someone who could stand beside a princess to shape the destiny of Zephira. Lyra turned to him, her eyes soft but determined. "Whatever comes next, we will face it together." Ethan smiled, a steady, confident smile. "Together," he agreed. And in that moment, the accidental husband and the princess knew that their union, born from a mistake, had grown into something far greater. Something that could change not only their lives but the fate of two worlds, united by courage, understanding, and the unexpected power of a single human heart.